From the heart of Spherus Magna, right to your home, this is the Bionicle Inspiration Series. We're back again with another weekly episode, and today we're going to take a request that you guys sent in and put it in this episode here. So, you guys requested mocks related to the video game Doom, all the different iterations of Doom. There's a whole bunch of different versions of the game. And we're going to focus on mocks that specifically are inspired by that game, because that's always a really great way to get some ideas for what to build, is to look to video games, play some video games, go online and watch a playthrough of a video game and use that as a bit of inspiration. There'll be some cool character designs in there, or some cool monsters you'll fight, or something like that, and that might inspire a certain type of character design that you want to make. So it's always a good place to look for ideas, and so let's focus specifically on one type of video game and see what sort of cool stuff is there. Plus, I know a lot of Bionicle fans enjoy this game, so hopefully it's just cool too to just see some nice mocks inspired by Doom. A quick caveat before we play. I have not played the game Doom or any of its iterations, so, you know, I did a little bit of research before this episode began. But if I say something or do something and you're like, oh my god, you clearly haven't played the game, then you would be correct, because I have not. Just wanted to make that clear so that we can all avoid that embarrassment. But there you go, just wanted to specify that. But let's dive in today to some Doom-inspired mocks. The first mock of this monster, there we go. This one's by Unpixeled, and it's called Baron of Hell. I believe it's called that, at least. Again, this is my limited Doom research. But this is a fantastic mock. This is, of course, from what I've gathered, what it's inspired by. This is a depiction of that from the game. It's done a good job of sort of recreating that there, especially with the color blocking of making sure that the legs are that sort of dark brown color to kind of showcase the sort of more almost Minotaur-like aspects of the legs on this character here. It's awesome. I love too the kind of tooth design on this mock here, using the Borok teeth elements that came on the Borok sets. Just works well there for creating the sort of toothy maw for this character. Just a very simple way of designing the teeth there, just getting a whole bunch of those and putting it in as such. They look a little bit more sort of tan rather than white, which I believe they come in a few other colors other than white, but white's certainly the most common color for that piece. But obviously here they look a little bit more tan, which I don't believe they exist in tan, but of course this is a digital mock, so a lot of these pieces don't exist in the colors that they come as. But that's one of the fun things about building in the digital realm. So always something to consider, which sort of way do you want to build, physically or digitally, it's up to you. But yeah, still, regardless of the color, really, really nice tooth design there, and also quite a nice horn design. You know, it matches the source material fairly well there, and, you know, you could do all sorts of different horn designs or claw designs in all sorts of crazy different ways. But heck, you know, it works pretty well just to use this Antros kind of claw element here for these horns. So yeah, honestly, nothing wrong with that. And always something to consider as well is what sort of kind of just prefab pieces you can use. Because yeah, sure, you could build a more in-depth, you know, version of it using like 70 different pieces, using a whole bunch of smaller system elements or whatever. But sometimes just using these swords like this actually just works pretty well, you know? So sometimes the simplest solution is actually just as good as a super complex, amazing, intricate version that uses pieces in clever ways or whatever. Yeah, yes, that can be good, but so can this. The simplicity of it's very nice. I also enjoy too just kind of the general construction of this mock, how much CCBS it's using, you know? It's always nice to see mocks that more heavily lean into using CCBS, because well, there's some of the more recent pieces, so it's something that you more than likely have a lot more of in your collection. But also, too, you can get such beautiful, consistent texturing with a lot of those pieces, and just overall, it just looks really nice just seeing everything together like that. I think it's really cool. Additionally, as well, I love kind of taking a look at the limbs on this mock, the arms and the legs there. He's used that sort of double jointed sort of design. You saw it on some of the other kind of Titans from Hero Factory and some of Bionicle as well. It's just a kind of really clever way of just sort of buffing out the design. Just, you know, instead of having the one sort of bone line of those Hero Factory bone elements, doubling it up, having two, and then finding a way of connecting them in the middle. It's exactly as we see here on the limbs there. It's just a good way to, like I said, buff it up, but also just allowing you to have even more room to play with. You know, you can really armor up on both sides and on the top and bottom as well, which that can be a little bit more limited when you're building in just a sort of more thinned out, smaller, sort of typical one bone structure like that. So always something to consider. Of course, that it may not work as well on sort of smaller scale mocks because it might look a little bit too sort of thick or not proportionate to the other elements. But as you start to go a bit bigger, it's certainly something to consider, and it works really well here, that's for sure. So that's it for this this pretty cool mock. Nice work, Unpixeled. On to the next mock now. This was a submitted mock by our good man, the Mugbearer. An awesome person. Be sure to check out some of his stuff. He also does some commissions as well, so be sure to look into that, because I myself did a commission from the man. He's a good person. I very much appreciate what he does for the community, so be sure to check him out. There'll be links in the description. Anyway, so this mock here is called Revenant, and this is what it looks like from the video game itself. Terrifying. Obviously, if you've played, you'll know a little bit more about this than I do, but this is, I think, is a very awesome depiction of a revenant. Of a revenant. Stumbling over my words. Obviously, of course, this is another digital mock. I promise you, there are some physical mocks coming soon, so stay tuned. But this one's got a lot going for it, for sure. I like that this sort of has that more sort of skeletal, kind of zombie-like style and look to it, you know? Obviously, if you want to specifically build this from the video game, you'd lean towards this. But if you're also just looking to make a sort of zombie mock or a skeleton-like mock, there's still a lot you can learn from this, which is fantastic. So looking at how it's been done, it's using just a lot of unarmored Hero Factory or CCBS bone elements, the same sort of bone elements we were discussing before in the last mock there. Obviously, they've been coloured into colours they don't quite exist in, this sort of more fleshy, nougat-y tan kind of colour here. But still, you know, you could still very easily do this sort of design with other colours that exist and just make it work, or, you know, use your imagination, or maybe get your paint out and paint some of these pieces. That's totally up to your way of building and your preferences. But it works well. This sort of more slimmed down limb design, which also uses some of the actual Hero Factory bone pieces that actually physically resemble bones from some of the skull villains from Bionicle G2. Yeah, I think it works fantastic. It's a great way of showing a more sort of fleshed down zombie skeleton vibe that very much fits the source material. It's awesome. I also love too some of the asymmetry on this mock, specifically with the colors, how there's a little bits of sort of red thrown in there as well, just to kind of give it that sort of blood gut look that fits the source material. So yeah, very clever way of playing around with colors there. And also, hey, maybe you want to rebuild this yourself and you're like, yeah, I don't have enough of this specific color. Well, maybe you could do something like that and introduce, you know, little bits of red and find some sort of justification for it, like, oh, that's they're bleeding, or, you know, they're a zombie dude, so they've got exposed flesh, or whatever kind of wonderfully weird, kind of creepy, macabre things like that you might want to throw in there. That's something to consider. The Mugbearer is the king of building brick-built system heads, and this is another great example of that, because it might be a little bit more difficult to achieve that sort of head design on a Bionicle, or hey, maybe you have managed to find a whole bunch of flesh-coloured CCBS bones, which there are a couple of, not a lot, but a few, and you've got to the head and you're like, I don't know what to do for this. Well, maybe then a custom head design is your best way to go, because that's kind of the only way you could achieve that sort of colour. Yeah, this is just a far better way of building a more sort of skull-like humanoid-style head in a sort of smaller manner as well, which fits the rest of the build. So it's very fitting and very cool for sure. So yeah, just a fantastic design and a great way of recreating that source material there. Some awesome stuff. Good job. Let's move on to the main event. This is Doomguy by Anton Sunderstorm. That's such a cool name. Doomguy and Sunderstorm. Name your mock Sunderstorm, guys. That's a great idea. So yes, this is Doomguy, which I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is the main protagonist of the game. And if I'm wrong with that, well, just what am I doing? But here's some source material. Obviously, there's different iterations of them, and maybe we'll cover that on the next mock. But this is a great example of just how cool that can look. So this is a little bit more of a system-heavy version, but there are little Bionicle elements thrown in there, which I'll talk about in a sec there. But I've said it before, and I'll say it many times after this. I always think it's a great idea to branch out and play with a bit of system. Not only because you're able to kind of pack in more details or achieve certain things that you couldn't with Bionicle pieces, but also, hey, we don't really have a lot of Bionicle CCBS focused Hero Factory, whatever you want to call it, sets at the moment. they are not things that LEGO are currently making. You know, occasionally those sorts of pieces get sprinkled into some sets, but it's not common. So with that, what you gonna do? Well, play with some of the new system pieces that are coming out. Find ways of integrating them into your mocks. And I think culturally that is how the fandom is moving. A lot of the time people are branching out and playing more with the system pieces and producing some awesome stuff as a result. So never be afraid to play with your system. And this mock here I think is a good example of a nice sort of combination of the two. So how so? Well, we take a look at all the limbs here. It's using a whole bunch of different kind of curved slope pieces and other very kind of rounded elements to produce this very realistic sort of human proportion design. But there are some limb elements here that combine Bionicle pieces. So if we specifically focus on the waist here, we notice some hand connector pieces that are attached onto some sort of ball joint. So how are those attached? Well, there's a whole different variety of LEGO pieces that actually have Technic connections on them. There's a lot of 1x2 LEGO bricks that have you know, cross holes, circle holes, or two circle holes, or all sorts of different sort of stuff there, which you can use to attach your system pieces onto your Bionicle pieces. So I imagine that's simply attached by a 1x2 brick with the, you know, the cross pin hole in there. And we also see a bit lower down on this mock, on the ankles of this mock, we see a grey ball joint, which appears to be attached into some sort of axle, and then it's attached into one of those 2x2 curved, circular, rounded plates, which of course, in the middle of it, has an axle connection onto it. So there's another way of attaching it. So just sort of study some of your system pieces that you might have got in, I don't know, maybe some of the more recent sort of Ninjago or Monkey Kid mechs and things, which do have a lot of those sort of hinge pieces or pieces that allow you to sort of transition from Bionicle to system, or you know, just take a look at pretty much any LEGO set for the most part, really. There's a lot of different pieces that are system related and do have different holes and connection points that you can use to transition into Bionicle stuff. So just have a look around your collection, see what you've got, see how you can make it work. And you could do something very similar to this, where you just have a very subtle transition into a Bionicle part or two, and then it allows you to really branch into your system stuff there. Yeah, it's cool. Speaking of system stuff, of course, really nice sort of color blocking on this mock, using the tan to represent the flesh, which again, very similar to the source material, and a lot of these different system pieces being used here to really recreate a very accurate, effective looking mask for this character as well. That's awesome. So yeah, a lot to love about this one here. And, you know, you might be like, hey, I really like Doomguy. Well, let's throw in another one. And this one is super cool. It's Doom Slayer by Jarek. So, this is really cool. I wanted to throw in two examples of this guy because he's pretty cool, but also this mock here is sort of very much a more sort of detail-heavy, detail-rich version of the last mock we saw. We were talking a lot about system stuff, and we'll get to some more Bionicle-focused Doom characters a little bit later down the line here, so stay tuned. But this mock here, I think, is a fantastic example of just how awesome you can make your mock look when you really seriously pack in a whole bunch of system pieces. For example, the head design on this mock, using different sort of binocular elements or sort of grilled plates and other curved slopes and angled pieces and things, produces just a fantastic looking helmet design. But then like the sort of rib area on this mock here, using some of those other kind of curved slope pieces to create this sort of weird ab-like effect on the torso. And all sorts of other just crazy, crazy details. The Exoforce robot bad guy arms being used on the boots to create this fantastic looking texture. Some of the new 1x2 plates that have the rounded edges on them, they're being used there on the grey arm, just as a sort of interesting way of kind of putting a nice texture on it there. There's a lot of really nice stuff there, whether it's just adding in a new unique texture or just finding a way of just making a funky looking pattern. It just works well and looks cool. And again, it's very accurate to the source material as well. It's really is a sight to behold. So certainly that's something to consider. What sort of really interesting nitty-gritty little tiny system pieces can you put into your Bionicle mocks to really effectively just take it to another level, really pack in detail, make it just look awesome. This, of course, is a very high-level expert example of how to do that. But hey, if you're a little bit newer to that sort of thing, it's something to play with. And you know, I see a bunch of people who look at just incredible mocks like this and they go like, man, I could never build like that. I wish I was that good. Well, yeah, sure, you could look at it from that perspective, but why not look at it from the perspective of, okay, that's my goal. I want to get to that level someday. How can I get there? Well, I got to start small. Let's just put a few new system pieces in my next mock and see how I can work with that. Or why don't I specifically build mocks that will use system? They may turn out awful, but that doesn't matter. I'm just still learning, I'm still playing, I'm still experimenting, and I'll see what I learn, you know? That's the thing. You're not just going to be an overnight success and suddenly be this amazingly talented, amazingly awesome, builds incredible mocks kind of guy. It takes a bit of time, it takes a bit of work and progress and consistently building and learning all that sort of stuff. So don't be afraid if the mock you make isn't that good. It's probably not going to be, because that's how art works. You're not always, your first draft isn't always going to be your best. But try and try again, ask people, seek feedback, send me a message. I'll happily let you know my thoughts and let you know how I think you could improve, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, you never know what might come of it, you know? So just keep playing, keep learning, and you can get to something just incredible like this one day. Because, man, this is a fantastic mock that's just packed full with fantastic techniques. So really nice work. Let's move on, though, to another Doom mock, which this one's a little bit more Bionicle focused. It's by Dylan Neves, and it's called Lego Doom Imp. So this, of course, is what it's inspired by. This guy looks super cool. And this mock, yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. I love specifically how the head design on this mock is being made. So it's using 3 of these pieces here as we go to Bricklink. It's called a Technic Wedge Belt Wheel Pulley. So these pieces came in brown, and they're being used here on this mock to form the kind of face. You can see 1 at the bottom and 2 at the top there. And he's used some of the different individual holes to add in sort of white studs for teeth, a few other different brown pieces there, and a sort of a few red elements there for the kind of tongue or the sort of base of the mouth or whatever, to, yeah, just sort of form this very cleverly designed sort of mouth design there. So that's an interesting way of approaching that. And that piece I showed you on Bricklink there, the, what's it called again, the pulley wedge belt wheel piece there, that's a piece I have a fair few of in a bunch of different colors. So there's no reason you couldn't sort of recreate something fairly similar to this with your own pieces in your own collection there. And it's sort of rounded off at the top there with a backwards Rakshi head element and a few other studs there to form the eyes. It looks fantastic. It looks really cool. Of course, this mock is brown in its color scheme. Brown it's kind of a semi-common color, but also kind of not. I don't know. It's a lot more common in system, but it's not something you see all that much these days, at least, with your CCBS and your Bionicle pieces. But, you know, this mock here is using a whole bunch of brown pieces, which is fantastic. It's using a bunch of Ben 10 brown pieces as well, specifically the upper and lower legs and arms there. Yeah, and I think that's a great idea to use those sorts of pieces there, especially because they are your sort of prefab limb elements. But naturally, they're sort of a little bit more skinnier. You're not sort of packing them on with armor or doing a super complex kind of bulky brick-built version of a limb or an upper arm, a lower leg or whatever that uses, you know, 20 different pieces or whatever. It's just, you know, the one piece for the arm or the one piece for the leg, that sort of thing. And adding a few spikes on it here and there, whatever. But it gets the job done. You know, and when we look at the source material, it's naturally fairly lanky and skinny, and just using those prefab limb pieces, again, gets the job done. It's like I said up top, you know, yeah, it can work well to do your super complex designs, or you could just use some prefab limbs, and that just gets the job done, and that's all you need to do. So, always something to consider. Is the simple option the better option, or not? Ask yourself, play with it, see what works. Who knows? But yeah, I think it's a fantastic mock, and a great way of recreating the imp from Doom. So, final mock now. This one's by Marco, and this is Cyberdemon. I actually featured this in a Biss episode, like, what, ages ago. I think it was like episode like 12 or something. But I wanted to show it again because I think it's really, really cool. And this is a Cyberdemon, of course, from Doom. They look awesome. So, yeah, Cyberdemon here is fantastic. I love how it's using a lot of the pieces that came on Pahatu G2. Specifically, too, I imagine he's kind of just bought maybe like 1 or 2 of that set. And that's kind of been the bulk stimulus for building this mock here. Like, obviously, it's using a few different pieces from other sets and stuff, but probably about, I don't know, maybe like 70-80% of this mock is exclusively those pieces from Pahatu, or that sort of dark, medium, orangey kind of color there. That's awesome. That's really cool. So something to consider as well, you know. If you have a set that just naturally comes with a lot of one part, it could be a really good way, something to take apart and something to use when you're building a mock, just so that you have a whole bunch of one piece in one color. So you could do something like this. Or heck, maybe you're thinking, yeah, I'm going to go on eBay or I'm going to go online or something. I'm going to look up how one or two sets that I could buy. And maybe you buy Pahatu twice like this, and suddenly you've got a whole bunch of this color here you can play around with, and you can pack it into one mock in some cool ways like we see here. So yeah, something to consider. Looks really cool. I also love too the kind of gun arm that this mock has and this sort of mechanical leg that it's got as well. While that works for the source material for this mock, it also could work for one of your mocks. Maybe you want to go for an asymmetrical arm or leg design on your mock and you want one of them to have this cool gun arm or this cool sort of peg leg, robotic leg kind of design. It's certainly something to consider. It's certainly something that looks cool and unique. So yeah, something to think about. Also too, the head design on this mock is phenomenal. Looks awesome. These sort of really menacing teeth and those studs for eyes there. Again, really resembles the source material, but also just looks kind of menacing and really cool. And I really like that. But how has he done that specifically? Well, we kind of take a look at the very edges of the mouth. We can see some of those Exoforce robot arm pieces there. Man, they're just awesome pieces. I see them all the time in different mocks. If you're looking for some pieces to buy in your next Bricklink order, get some, because they're so helpful. If you're not too sure what piece I mean, they're the same pieces that are used on the fingers of this mock here, but in brown. So those are being used there to sort of attach the bottom two teeth, and those appear to be attached sort of further back on the head in some manner. A little hard to tell how specifically they're attached with this image here, but they're attached in some fashion. But it kind of appears that the top two teeth there, they just appear to be being held on a sort of 1x2 little lift arm piece there. I can't help but think that's just simply attached with friction. I don't think that's actually attached in any manner. I could be wrong. Prove me wrong if I am, by all means, but it could just be attached with friction, and that's always something to think about. Yes, you know, some people might argue it's not technically legal because you actually have to physically attach it or whatever, you know, whatever kind of argument you want to make, that's okay, but maybe you're building something and you're like, I just can't figure out this connection. Can you sort of force it in some manner where it's not physically connected, but it is sort of held in there just with friction, you know? Maybe if you shake the mock a little bit, it might fall off, but if it's sort of really jammed in there and you shake it a little bit and it's not, that's also a nice bonus, you know? It depends on the connection that you have. It may attach very well or it may not attach that well at all. But if that's something that floats your boat, if that's something that you want to do or approach when you're building, well, that's certainly something to consider. It's not actually having pieces attach, just making it look like they attach or finding more intricate, really, really different, weird connections like that aren't strictly speaking attached, but are from a certain point of view, all that sort of stuff. So something to consider, that's for sure. And of course, your friction joints and stuff will vary depending on what sort of pieces or mock that you're building. You know, it's a very sort of specific example for how you are building. But again, it all comes down to personal preference. If you want it to be attached, if you don't want those pieces to be too loose or too out there or too wild and crazy, then that's of course fine. You don't have to do that. But maybe you do want to do that. It's up to you. But yeah, this is a fantastic mock and a great recreation of the source material. Lovely work, Marco. Your Cyberdemon is fantastic. So that's it for a bunch of Doom-related Bionicle mocks. I used to do a whole bunch of different video game-related episodes of the Bionicle Inspiration series. If you want to check those out, because there are a few different Doom-related mocks in those, just check the playlists for the Bionicle Inspiration series, and you can find some other video game-related episodes there. They're pretty much, to my knowledge, just titled video game-related mocks, that sort of thing. So just give that a search and you can always find that there if you're interested, of course. But yeah, hey, that's it for this episode. And if you are looking at this episode and you're like, yo, you know, I really would love to put some of my own mocks on this show, you of course can. You can submit them through the email you're currently seeing on your screen right now. I had some submitted mocks in this episode. If you send me as many images as you want, a nice description or no description, completely up to you. Send me whatever, name of the mock, your name, any of that sort of stuff. Send it to me, I'll put it on the list, and one day it'll appear on the show. But of course, your patience is key, because I have a whole bunch of submissions to work through. I always do my best to put at least one or two per episode, if not more. And of course, I have the fan-submitted episodes every 10th episode of the Bionicle Inspiration series. You can also stay tuned for that. But eventually it'll appear on the show, but your patience is key. I've got a lot to work through. Additionally, links to all the mocks you saw in today's episode are in the description below. Be sure to check that out. Leave some love on some of these guys' stuff, because they are just phenomenal builders and they deserve the love that you can give them. Additionally, in the description below, there's links to some of my social media and some of the other things that I've got going on, including my Patreon, where you can have access to the Patron exclusive podcast, where every week I post a small podcast. I say small, they range from about 30 minutes to an hour per episode. There's already at least sort of 20, 25 there at this point now, so there's a nice backlog there if you want something to listen to while you build. And I discuss sort of fun topics ranging from just sort of topical LEGO news at the time, or just, I don't know, mental health, or maybe I'll talk about some of my favorite top 10 Bionicle sets, which I've been doing recently. That's been fun. I sort of go by each year of Bionicle and discuss all that sort of stuff, so it's something to consider. And additionally, too, you can see some of my social media in the links in the description below. Recently, I've been posting a whole bunch of backlog, well, not backlog necessarily. I've re-photographed old mocks, and I'm just putting them in a new light with some better photography there. So if you want some nice throwback mocks, they're on Instagram, as well as some fun new mocks as well. Some fun little vignettes and little Star Wars ships and things. I'll be posting those in the near but distant future, including a nice little Star Wars Vig I just recently built. I have to photograph that one still, but it's a fun one. It's a really good one. It's one that I'm pretty proud of. So that'll be posted real soon if you're interested. Anyway, that's it for the plugs. So be sure to consider all of that sort of stuff. And I hope you have a fantastic day. And I hope if you're planning on building some Doom mocks, or just any mocks in general, you have fun doing so. And hopefully we've inspired you in some fashion. Thanks so much for listening, guys. I'll see you in the next episode. That is all, folks. Bye for now.